Ever since it began, Mega Man has always been one of the greatest textbook examples of how to make a game replayable. And while this can be attributed to its simple yet addictive gameplay, or the game's easy to pick up nature, the real reason why it can be played so many different times is because of its boss selection system. Now on paper, this mechanic may seem kind of small, but in practice, it's an ingenious method of progression that not only gives the player more knowledge about the game, it also allows room for creativity and the ability to alter the way you actually go about finishing. See, replayability has always been a major factor to the overall quality of a game. While some can either be so good they're worth replaying again, others can give you more incentives to return, like unlocking more content after beating the game the first time. But because of how Mega Man is designed, it gives a brand new reason for the player to say, hey, that game was cool, and although I finished it like 5 seconds ago, I want to try playing through it again in a different path than how I did before! And although this non-linearity has always been a defining staple of Mega Man as a series, this video was made to give love to the game I feel does this progression system the best. And no, it's not Mega Man 1, cause that game's kind of ass. It is, of course, drumroll please. It's gonna destroy the mic. Mega Man 2. Now guys, trust me, I know that everyone and their RuneScape girlfriends have all agreed that Mega Man 2 is the greatest game ever. So what's the point of talking about it? Well, first of all, 7 is better, and second, out of all the games in the classic series, Mega Man 2 seems to be the only one that truly understands how to use this mechanic to its fullest potential. You see, 2 is much more forgiving for players that are either new or like to try beating the game in an unorthodox manner. And the reason for that is because bosses here are much more open-ended with how they can be defeated. See, every Robot Master has a specific weakness to another weapon, and by experimenting around, you'll be able to learn specific matchups, like how the Bubble Lead is super effective against Heat Man, or how Flash Man is weak to the Metal Blade. But here, Robot Masters aren't designed to have only one weakness, because by trying out more of your weapons on other bosses, you can learn that there are actually more ways to take them down. For instance, like mentioned before, it's ideal to use the Metal Blade on Flash Man. However, he can be taken down just as easily with other weapons like the Atomic Fire or the Crash Bombs. This as a result creates many more strategical layers into 2's design, as it doesn't punish the player for trying out different methods of fighting, and instead rewards them with more knowledge of the game and how they can spice up their playthroughs. Not to mention that this knowledge is also great for choosing your first Robot Master. Now usually every Mega Man game has a certain go-to boss that's pretty easy to take down with just the Mega Buster, and while it's no different in 2 with Metal Man, there are still plenty of other Robot Masters that can be taken down fairly easily as well when starting out. The game doesn't punish you for doing things out of sequence, because in reality there isn't much of a sequence to begin with. It's almost like the developers knew that the game would complement its core mechanic much better if it didn't put limitations onto the player. There are hardly any times in 2 where you're essentially brick-walled for beating a boss until you get their specific weapon. Sure, Robot Masters like Heat Man or Quick Man may not be the most ideal places to start, but you still have a fighting chance if you manage to reach them. And the whole reason why I brought this up is because it's why I find Mega Man 2 so enjoyable. Every time I revisit this game, I know that I have plenty of opportunities to make one playthrough feel completely different from the last. And despite personally enjoying some of the later installments in the classic series more, most of them fail to capture this design choice and prefer to have a much more linear and to-the-point adventure. And the most obvious place to find this is within the Robot Masters themselves. For a lot of the games after 2, the bosses have become much more strict with how they can be defeated. Instead of them being weak to a variety of weapons, they'll now really only be affected by one specific attack, and it gets rid of a lot of strategy that was previously introduced. This of course also pays a massive toll on how you're able to get started, whereas the player really only has one option when it comes to choosing a Robot Master for assured success, because most of the time in the later games, if you don't go for the first intended boss, you're probably gonna get your ass kicked unless if you're really good or something. Now some could say by the game's limiting how many weapons are effective against Robot Masters, it adds a layer of surprise to everything and makes you think more as a result. But what that actually does is it forces these games to rely more on trial and error, which as a result can slow these games down tremendously if a player isn't well versed or doesn't have access to the internet. I mean, would you want to go through an entire level of Mega Man 4 just to learn that, say, Dust Man is nearly impossible to beat with just your Mega Buster? Cause the answer is no, you wouldn't. great. But while 2 has a specific design choice that I love, so do all the other classic games as well. For example, 5 incorporated the letter collecting system inside of levels, which would encourage revisits and would sometimes test your skills as a player. 7 added more field collectibles, giving a better reason to further explore the stages and use all of your items to their fullest abilities. And even 8 introduced the upgrades mechanic, which gave bolts a better reason to exist outside of using them just for E-tanks. While 2 is far from my favorite Mega Man game, its design makes it my favorite to revisit. With both the stellar freedom it gives the player as well as its charming simplicity, 2 is truly a great game. And yeah, maybe it is a little overrated, but honestly, who cares? Whether 10 people liked it or a million people liked it, all that matters is if the game was good, which obviously it is. So get off of your hipster ass and give it a try if you haven't already. You may end up loving it, or you may just say, yeah, it was alright, I guess. But with all that said, here's to Mega Man 11. Let's hope it lives up to its hype and can deliver both a fun and unique experience from a series that's over 30 years old. Cause God knows how long it'll take for another one to come out. Anyways, I give Mega Man 2 my professional rating of 7 Blu-ray copies of the whole 2003 out of 4. Okay, that's it, bye.